Good morning, everyone. And today, over this third session, we have a great scholar and Professor P.Krishna. And Professor P.Krishna was P.Krishna is currently in charge of Krishnamurti Studies Center at the Rajghat Education Center for Krishnamurti Foundation. He was a director of the center and the principal of Rajghat Basin School from 1986 to 2002. He is a trustee of foundation and continues to be involved with its activities. He has writing articles and books on various issues relating to the teachings of Jiddu Krishnamurti. He has also delivered the lectures on education, science, and society to varied audience. He is an honorary scientist and a fellow of Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi, as well as Indian Academy of Science, Bangalore. Before he joining the Krishnamurti Foundation, India, he was a professor of physics at the Department of Physics, Banaras Hindu University, where he had been faculty member for 24 years. He specialized in solid-state physics, and his research and teaching been in X-ray crystallography. So we are very happy, and I am privileged. Professor P.Krishna has kindly accepted our invitation and deliver the lectures on this Jiddu Krishnamurti teaching. And here, as Professor Ji, you have 1 hour for your talk and a half hour for discussion. And now I'm looking forward to hearing your talk on the life and works of Jiddu Krishnamurti. Thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure for me. It's a great pleasure for me to come to your beautiful institute. I have been here before several times when Professor Samdong Rinpoche was the director of the institute, and it brings back memories of those days. I am thankful also to your president and secretary for thinking of me and giving me this opportunity to tell you about Krishnamurti's life and his teaching. First of all, I want to know from you if everybody here understands English. If you don't, can you please raise your hand? So is it all right if I speak in English rather than in Hindi? Yes. The story of Krishnamurti's life and also his teaching reads almost like mythology and would have been considered to be a legend, except that it all took place in the 20th century. So every part of his life was well documented, historically accurate. His talks are there as recorded in audios and videos. And therefore, what I am going to describe to you are all facts, though there is a lot of mystery about it. I myself don't know the answer to that mystery. He was born in 1895 in a small village town called Madanapalli in Chittoor district of Andhra Pradesh. It's on the border with Karnataka. His father was a small official in the British government and was frequently transferred from one town to another. His mother was just a housewife, but it is mentioned that she was a deeply religious person herself. After his father retired, I think around 1908, he was looking for a job, and he wrote to Mrs. Annie Besant, who was the president of the Theosophical Society in Adyar in Madras at that time, asking if he could come and work in the Theosophical Society there, because he had read about her and he had a lot of respect for Mrs. Besant and for the Theosophical Society. And she gave him something to do in the Theosophical Society. So the family moved to a small quarter just on the outskirts of the society, and his father started working there. You must have already heard and learned about the ideals of the objectives of the Theosophical Society from my previous speaker, so I will not repeat that. Madame Blavatsky, who was the founder of one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, was a woman who had great insight and some kind of occult powers with which she could relate and talk to Mahatmas and bring messages from the Mahatmas, and she was in contact with them. You must have heard from my previous speaker that Theosophists believe in the masters, who are also, another name for them are the Mahatmas. Some kind of divine forces or divine energies with which she could communicate. And it was on their instruction that she constituted the Theosophical Society and also chose Adyar in Madras as the location of the headquarters of the Theosophical Society, though she was a Russian lady and she was living and constituted the Theosophical Society in New York in USA. That's why I said that it is a great mystery about the whole thing that I'm going to tell you today. One of the things she predicted was that the Maitreya consciousness wants to manifest again on earth. And soon a Messiah will appear. She didn't say where. Who will bring a science, religion, and philosophy together. Right now, she said, they are seen as antagonistic to each other, as separate fields, and he will integrate them. He will bring a new light. She predicted all this. And I have read that the main purpose of the Theosophical Society also was to prepare the ground for the reception of this new teaching, which will come through this new Messiah. They called him the world teacher. All this was predicted much before Krishnamurti appeared on the scene. Mrs. Annie Besant, who was a close disciple of Madame Blavatsky, also had these occult powers, and she was also in contact with the masters, and they were looking for a young boy in whose body this Maitreya consciousness will manifest. She had a colleague named Mr. C.W. Leadbeater, who was a bishop of the Christian church, liberal Christian church. And he was an Australian who was also living and working with her. He also had a lot of occult powers and was considered quite an authority on occult matters. He could see auras around the brain of a person. I don't know if you know what an aura is. I don't know myself, but what I have read about it is that people who have occult perception are able to see colors or light around the brain of a human being. And from that combination of colors that they see, they are able to gauge the spiritual status of that person, how selfless he is, and so on. So one day Leadbeater was just taking a walk on the seashore near the Theosophical Society in India. And these boys, Krishnamurti and some other boys, were playing there. This was in 1908 or 1909. And he saw an unusual aura in this boy. He said, "This is the most selfless consciousness that I have witnessed, completely pure." And so he went and told Mrs. Besant that I have found the boy who is going to be the next Messiah, and the Maitreya consciousness will use this body as a vehicle of the world teacher. Don't ask me how he predicted all this. Mrs. Besant had complete faith in the occult perceptions of Leadbeater. Before all this, they were doing research on materials. They brought various minerals, put it on the table, and they said, "We make ourselves smaller than the smallest particle in this material, and what we are writing are what we observe." And they wrote a book called Occult Chemistry, in which they describe what the hydrogen atom is like, what the nitrogen atom is like, what carbon is like. Their findings did not agree with the scientific knowledge at that time, and the scientists and so on laughed at them. But eventually, when it came to modern science, which is the knowledge today, one finds uncanny parallels between what they wrote and what the physicists and chemists today have found out about matter. So they had some sort of inner perception that is verified, and all this was before Krishnamurti was discovered. So there were people with this kind of consciousness, whether you want to call it a divine consciousness or in contact with the divine, but it's extrasensory perception. So she accepted what Leadbeater had predicted and decided to adopt Krishnamurti as her son and bring him up in the Theosophical Society, because she said that was what was the main purpose of the Theosophical Society, to work for this Messiah and to prepare the ground for his teachings to be accepted in the world or to be received by the world. So she predicted that this boy is going to be the world teacher, and they started educating him. She was already a personality, very distinguished personality, highly respected in Europe because she had done a lot of social work there, in England and in Europe and so on. You can read about it in her autobiography, her work in Europe. She wrote it down herself, and I would strongly recommend that you read her autobiography of Annie Besant. I'm sure it would be there in your library. If it's not there, you can get it from the Theosophical Bookshop in Kamacha. It's worth owning that book. She staked her whole reputation on this because she was friends with Bernard Shaw and Charles Bradlaugh and very distinguished people in England who laughed at her. They said, "What is this? You're predicting this young boy is going to be the Messiah. This is all nonsense," and so on. But she didn't change her mind. The boy was very weak, both physically and mentally. He was beaten regularly at school. He couldn't pass any examinations. So they withdrew him from the school and adopted him and brought him up in the Theosophical Society and educated him there in languages and so on. But Mrs. Besant said, we must not condition this consciousness even into theosophy, because this is the consciousness which is going to manifest, this is the body that is going to manifest the Maitreya consciousness. And the Maitreya consciousness may not accept anything that we say, because all previous incarnations or avatars like the Buddha or Krishna or Jesus Christ have been people who have broken away from tradition, broken away from the past, from whichever culture they had grown, and said something completely different, something completely new. So she knew, and therefore they said, we will bring him up in such a way as not to condition him strongly in theosophical ideals. Of course, he grew up there, he must have listened to them and imbibed the theosophical things and so on. But she created for him a separate organization which was separate from the Theosophical Society. I'm just trying to show you how far-reaching her vision was, that she didn't want him even to be in an organization which was part of the Theosophical Society. This organization was called Organized, was called the Order of the Star of the East. It was an organization which was to have members who believe in this prophecy of the coming of the world teacher and who are preparing themselves to receive his teaching, and who will work for the world teacher when he comes. The belief was so widespread all over the world. There were something like 42,000 members in this Order of the Star of the East. And they were all trying to learn and perfect themselves, waiting for the Maitreya consciousness to manifest through this body of this boy called Krishnamurti. So that's the atmosphere in which he grew up. There was already a lot of adulation. People were falling at his feet and so on. Something similar to what happens with the Dalai Lama. When the Dalai Lama is just a young boy and he is chosen like that, and then he turns out to be a spiritual person later on. Something very similar happened with him. Then, for various reasons, they sent him in 1912 or so to England for education, because they said this boy is going to be a world teacher not only for India but for the whole world. and therefore his teachings must reach out to the whole world, and we must not make him only Indian. So they brought him up and educated him in England. But there, again, he failed. He could not get entrance into either Cambridge or Oxford, and everybody was laughing at her. And his younger brother was a normal boy, very bright, and he got admission and he passed examinations, but they never changed their mind. They never said that boy, we made a mistake, this boy is going to be the Messiah, not the other one. So they must have had some deep intimations from the divine about their choice of the boy, because normally a rational person would have said, we have made a mistake, this fellow is not intelligent. Huh? We have often discussed in the Krishnamurti Foundation, if Krishnamurti himself had applied for admission in our schools, whether we would have admitted him. Because we test the child before we take admission, and he would have failed the test. So the man who created all these schools, created all this education, would not have been eligible for admission in his own schools. Something which should give us great humility. That all this knowledge and so on is fairly superficial thing. That's what we know how to do, so that's what we do. But there are dimensions far beyond all this knowledge and thinking and philosophy and so on, about which we don't know anything. Very few of us get in touch with that. That's why there is a great mystery, and we are all part of that mystery, but we don't know that we are what is this mystery we are part of as human beings. The story of Krishnamurti illustrates that. Then came the First World War, and they wanted to send him away from all this violence in Europe. He was being educated privately, mostly in languages like French and Italian and English, of course. And he was living with fairly rich people in that British culture of the rich people, the Lords and Byrons of England and so on. So he acquired all those manners and so on, but he remained vegetarian because all the theosophists were vegetarian. He was then sent away to America, where Mrs. Besant bought a lot of property for the work of Krishnamurti, and she had predicted that a new race called the sixth root race will arise in this part of the world, in California. And so she bought large tracts of land there, and the Order of the Star of the East was also established there, and so on. And Krishnamurti lived there during the war years. It is there in 1922, under a pepper tree, when he was meditating, that he suddenly had a kind of mystic experience in which the self dissolved, he felt one with the whole world, and so on. It is described, it is all there. If you read his biography, everything is documented, as I said. So I'm not telling you anything which is exaggeration. You can verify it because it's all recorded. Because his whole life was being recorded by the theosophists, and they believed in the truth. Theosophy said truth is the highest religion. So there was no question of propaganda or falsifying it and so on. So it's all very well documented. A peculiar process thing started called the process, where his body would tremble and suffer pain, and the soul or the Atman or whatever you want to call it left the body, went off, and this body would be complaining, he's gone away, he's not here, call him back, and so on. And people who were close to this body would hold the body, and he, after some time, I don't remember, half an hour, 1 hour, he would come back into his body and then ask what was happening. He didn't know what was happening to the body. So mystery, great mystery. What was this thing called the process? And that went on in his life, all through his life. Was very strong in the beginning, afterwards became rarer but equally intense. So he was going through some mysterious process. The people around him thought that it is some disease. They wanted to take him to a doctor and consult if there is some problem with him. But he refused. He seemed to know what it was, and he said, no, it is not what you think, and I don't need a doctor. He also is on record saying, my whole life is planned by some other people. I think that is an alluding to the masters, that his whole life is planned. That his birth, from his birth to his death, that his whole life and the sequence in his life was planned by other people. Again, great mystery. I don't know what that means. All this is recorded and documented. After that 1922 experience, somehow a sort of window of perception seems to have opened in his mind, and he began learning for himself in a big way and changing. Before that, he was like a normal boy, just interested in cars and motorcycle and girls and so on, like anybody else. But after the 1922 experience, it transformed his consciousness. He became a deep inquirer. In 1925, his brother, who was the only close relative he had because his parents had passed away and he was not anywhere near his brothers and sisters, this brother was also adopted for company with him, called Nityananda, and the masters had predicted that he will not die. But he died. And that shook him very badly because he experienced deep sorrow. He was on a ship from USA to India to attend some meetings and conferences here. And on the way he got a telegram saying, your brother has passed away. He died of tuberculosis. So he was completely shaken because he felt that he had received this message himself, that Nitya will not die. And he trusted in the masters completely. But that message turned out to be false or wrong. So his faith in this whole thing of belief in the masters, not in the existence of the masters, please distinguish between that. This dependence on messages from the masters, his belief in this dependence broke down. He said that it's not reliable. One should not depend on some spiritual message to guide you in your life. You should cultivate your own intelligence, your own ability to face the situation and so on. However, he was still talking about being on the path and of having Leadbeater and Mrs. Besant as gurus and so on. But if you read his development from that time, 1925 till 1932, he's rapidly changing. As he perceives something to be true, the false drops away and he's transforming himself. So he wrote books like On the Path and things like that. And later on he denies the role of the path. He said, who brings the truth? So he's inquiring, he's questioning all the theosophical beliefs also. Ultimately, in 1929, in the presence of Mrs. Besant and Leadbeater and all those 25,000-30,000 members of the Order of the Star of the East, in Omen, in Holland, he gave his famous speech, which is entitled, Truth is a Pathless Land. That's the main philosophic difference between Krishnamurti and Theosophy. They both consider religion to be the highest truth, the truth to be the highest religion, and the truth to be posited as the unknown, and you must rise to the perception of the truth. Something very similar to also Buddhism. where Buddha also considers this self-knowledge as this quest for truth and for wisdom. But Theosophists said that the different religions are all different paths to the same truth. And Krishnamurti said truth is a pathless land. That means no path takes you there. It's wrongly interpreted to mean that he said you must not be on any path. He didn't say that. What he said was the path in itself does not bring the truth. You are always on a path. Even the atheist is on a path because your mind is going through various experiences. And that's all that the path is. It's putting you through various experiences, whether it's you're on the Christian path or Hindu path or Buddhist path. Your mind is being put through various experiences. But what is important is not the experience or the expertise. But what is important is whether you are picking up a truth out of that experience or you are picking up another illusion, another prejudice out of that experience. And this capacity to perceive the truth and eliminate the false, he called that the awakening of intelligence. That is intelligence, because everybody has experience. And if experience brought wisdom, then all old people should be wise. That's not an observed fact. All old people don't seem to be. There are many old people who are extremely prejudiced and cynical and so on. They are not wise people. So experience doesn't bring wisdom, but this perception of what is true and what is false, so that the false ends, brings wisdom, and that brings transformation in consciousness. And that, he said, is the main quest, religious quest, the essence of the religious quest. So it requires the learning mind. I would say that his teaching is that the learning mind is the path. You mistake the experiences and the path, particular way you worship the path, and he's saying no, the important thing is not the particular path or the particular series of experiences, but the capacity to learn from that. To learn means to pick up the truth and to throw away what is false. That is intelligence. Very similar to what the Buddha's teaching was for the monks. Not the Eightfold Path. What his teaching is, the absolute teaching of the Buddha for the monks, where he denied the role of the guru, where he said you have to be a light unto yourself, where he said you must find the truth for yourself, and I found my own path. There was no path I was following, because who was Buddha's guru? Or what was the path he was following? Nothing. He just picked up, found his own way, and came upon the truth. So that Krishnamurti's teaching is very close to the Buddha's absolute teaching for the monks. But he denied the Eightfold Path, and he often used to question whether the Eightfold Path is the creation of the Buddhist church or whether it was actually given by the Buddha himself. So Buddha's teaching is at two levels, and Krishnamurti talks only about the absolute level, not about the relative truth. And therefore no path. So he said that was his teaching. And when he came upon this truth, he said, I dissolve this organization, because you cannot arrive at the truth through an organization. You must not do propaganda. If you make, and belief is a private matter, if you try to spread it to other people and so on, what you are spreading is propaganda. It's not the truth. The truth cannot be handed to you by a guru or by a book. You have to come upon it yourself, which is what the Buddha also said, that you have to be a light unto yourself. And therefore he denied the role of the guru. People asked him, aren't you a guru? And he said, all I am telling you is that you have to come upon the truth for yourself, that you can do so by inquiring, like I inquired and I found out. You can do that also. You have got all those capacities. So just merely a man who points this out, I am not giving you the truth. So you are the teacher and you are the taught. He said, there is no outside teacher. As far as truth is concerned, there is for yoga, for good health, for academics and so on. You have experts and you can learn from them. But truth you cannot get from them. You have to discover for yourself. So he said this inquiring, learning mind and observing mind, one which is, he advocated what is called passive awareness. Passive means you are not trying to become anything, you are not trying to change anything, but you are just watching, the witness consciousness which is just watching because it is curious to learn about the truth and learning about oneself through watching and through inquiry. These were the important aspects of his teaching. Thereafter, he tried to reform the Theosophical Society from within. He gave lectures in the Theosophical Society and he felt that Theosophy was becoming like another religion, that it was having its own sacred books, that it was having its own authorities, and that it was not really engaged in the quest for truth, but it had created its own rituals, its own bishops and popes and so on, and accepting on authority of these people, and he felt that was all wrong. And so he wanted to change it from within, but the people around him, who were by that time in charge of the Theosophical Society, felt that he is being ungrateful to the society. They felt that we have educated him, we have brought him up, we picked him up from society, and now he is trying to criticize us and so on. They could not understand him. So in 1933, after Mrs. Besant died, he left the Theosophical Society. Thereafter, for something like 50 years or 53 years, he went around the world just staying with friends, giving talks, holding dialogues, communicating his teaching, exhorting people to learn about themselves. I'll briefly summarize the essential points of his teaching. But he said, there is no such thing as my teaching. So I'll give you the essential points, but he said, don't accept my teaching. Something similar to what the Buddha said. The Buddha also said, don't accept something because I say it. You find out whether it's true or not. And when in your experience you discover that it is true, only then accept it. Otherwise, don't accept it. This investigation is more important than acceptance of the truth. That's the meaning. Because when you just accept something, supposing you read everything in the Buddha and learn everything intellectually, you become a professor of Buddhist philosophy, right? Professor of Buddhist philosophy can give you excellent lectures on the Buddha, can tell you what Nagarjuna said about the Buddha and all this, but he himself not the Buddha. Why? Because his consciousness is not the Buddha consciousness. He has fear, he has greed, he has selfishness, he has sorrow. His consciousness is like that of any other man. But he is a professor of Buddhist philosophy. So we must distinguish the sage from the scholar. Scholarship doesn't bring transformation of consciousness. And the religious quest is not a quest for scholarship. The religious quest is a quest for transformation of consciousness. You have to come upon a consciousness which is like the Christ consciousness or like the Buddha consciousness, which has peace and love and compassion, non-violence actually in it. Otherwise, you are only throwing out words which were uttered by the Buddha. So Krishnamurti said, there is no such thing as my teaching. You don't have to understand the teaching. You have to understand yourself. You are the book. You have to understand yourself. The entire purpose of my teaching, he said, is to make you realize the need to understand yourself. Because right now, you are just identifying yourself with your conditioning, with all the ideas that have been given to you from childhood, by your culture, by your religion, by your parents and so on, which is just an accident of birth. You could have been born in communist China or in Sweden and you would be speaking a different language, eating different food and speaking about a different morality and so on. So all that he said is just conditioning which you receive from your environment as you grow up. That's not the truth. That's a partial point of view on life. And that's not the truth. So you have to go beyond this conditioning. You have to free yourself from this conditioning in order to come upon the truth. Otherwise, your mind becomes like a lawyer arguing all the time for the me and the mine, which is essentially the ego process. The ego is that somehow I feel my opinions are very important. My family is very important. My religion is very important. My country is very important. And I work for them. So then, naturally, the other man is working for his country, and so that creates enmity, competition, rivalry, ultimately war. So he pointed out that all these things come from this ego process, and you need to free yourself of this process by seeing it within yourself. Not just as an idea, not because Gandhi said or Buddha said ego is a bad thing and you are accepting that. It won't go away like that. But the day you realize that this ego process is like a danger, far greater danger than fire. So you don't get a desire to put your finger in the fire because it is so clear, the danger is so clear. Is that you approach things egotistically because you have not discovered for yourself the danger of the ego process, of approaching life egotistically. So be egotistic, but watch how the ego arises, what it does to your life, to your relationship, far vision also, ultimately to society. And you will discover that it is far more dangerous than fire. And when you discover that for yourself, your consciousness will transform. It will stop approaching life egotistically. But until you have yourself perceived that danger, just because I point out the danger and you accept that, yes, logically you accept that this is the danger, it won't go. It won't go, it will create a conflict between what you are and what you think you should be. And that conflict is not a religious life. That's not liberation or that's not freedom. So I'll come to tell me again how much time, what time do we have to end? 10 minutes more? Okay. I'll try to summarize the teaching. It's a vast teaching. There are some 40, 50 books because all his talks have been recorded and dialogues and tapes are there, videos are there, and they are being transcribed and more books are coming. So it's a vast teaching. But there are some basic pillars on which the entire building stands, his teaching stands. I would say the first pillar is that the problems of the world are not separate from the problems of the individual. That there is division out there, there is hatred out there, there is violence out there in society because it's there in our consciousness. Ultimately, whatever is there in our consciousness projects itself in our relationships. And thousands of such relationships constitute society. So, one of the truths which he pointed out was that all this idea that you can change society by changing laws or changing the politics or bringing a new religion is all false. It cannot change because they are just different ways of controlling the manifestation of the violence which is there in consciousness. So unless you go through a transformation of consciousness, unless the individual changes, there is going to be no fundamental change in society. And he pointed it out that there is violence in communism, there is violence in capitalism, there is violence in socialism, there is war in every religion. Religions, more wars have been fought in the name of religion than in any other, even nationalism. So he said that it does not remove violence. And unless you remove violence in your consciousness, it will not end out there. It's a false idea that some Messiah must come and he will discover what the truth is, then he will tell us how to live and we will all follow how to live. He said you can't follow another. That's another important pillar of his teaching. You cannot really deeply follow another. Because unless you have the wisdom of the Buddha in you, what will you follow about the Buddha? You can dress like him, you can eat the food like him, because these things you can decide about. You can wear a dress like him. So you can follow in the superficial things. But that is not the important thing about the Buddha. The important thing is that he got rid of hatred in his heart. How will you get rid of hatred in your heart? That's not something you can decide. So this is important to understand this, that our decision works only in very superficial things. You can decide your dress, the food you will eat, the job you will do, and so on. But can you decide that from tomorrow I will not worry? Can you decide that from tomorrow I will be happy, I will be peaceful? Can you decide to love your neighbor? So the most profound things in life don't come from decision. So he said, they are a byproduct of learning about yourself. And that is the kind of learning which we must promote in education. In education, we are only promoting the learning that is accumulative, that is learning skills, cultivation of memory, all that, knowledge, thinking ability, which gives power. But it is not the same thing as awakening of intelligence. Because power without wisdom is dangerous. Because you will use it also to destroy, to kill. And therefore it's important also to generate wisdom. And that requires this kind of self-inquiry, inquiry into oneself or the understanding of oneself, which is what was given a lot of importance also in Buddhist, by the Buddha. So wisdom, the real change in a human being is a byproduct of wisdom. You can't decide to bring that change. You can't decide to become non-violent. You can't decide to pursue beauty. Either you are sensitive and you perceive beauty, or you are not perceiving beauty. But there are reasons why you are become insensitive. And if you get rid of insensitivity, the perception of beauty will take place. And similarly, if you get rid of hatred and you get rid of jealousy and so on, then your love will flower in your consciousness. You don't have to decide to love. You can't decide to love. So you can't follow another. The third thing is, he said, intellectual understanding is not the realization of the truth. You have intellectually understood, logically understood what the Buddha said. That doesn't mean you have seen the truth of what the Buddha is pointing to. So that is the pathless bit, how to go from the knowledge of the truth to the perception of the truth. Truth lies at the level of perception. And unless you perceive it for yourself, it does not transform consciousness. It just transforms your ideas. And it doesn't matter, the ideas. There is not a tremendous difference between the communist has different ideas from and the Congress people have different ideas from BJP, but they are all violent. So at the consciousness level, there is no difference between a congressman or an Indian or a Hindu, so on. So next question is, how does one come upon this wisdom, the understanding of oneself? That is the religious quest. And he said, every time you experience a negative emotion, anger, jealousy, conflict, sorrow in your consciousness, it's an opportunity to learn. Don't run away from it. He said, that's a jewel. It's a jewel, like a jewel to be observed, looked at, reveals its beauty. It will reveal. The jealousy will reveal. So don't try to run away from it. That is what is actually taking place. Watch it. Learn through watching how it arises. Don't yield to it and don't also suppress it. Don't act on it. Just be witness to it, what is actually taking place, and you will learn. Because all learning requires observation. If I have to learn, even scientific learning, if you just see the clouds going by, it's a beautiful sight, but you don't learn anything. But when you ask a question with it, Why does the cloud move? And you say, okay, because the breeze blows. Why does the breeze blow? So you have a question in your mind and then you are observing. That combination makes for learning. Learning comes not from just observation, nor also just from inquiry. Inquiry coupled with observation brings learning. That's the essence of the learning mind. And it is not trying to avoid the pain. It is wanting to understand the pain, from where that pain is arising. If I feel insulted, I must find out from where does this feeling of insult come. What is an insult? That man just said you are a bloody fool. He didn't really hit me. Where is this pain coming from? I'm not able to sleep now and I'm trembling inside. From where? It's arising from within me, and therefore I can do something about it. Can I free myself of this feeling? That's part of self-inquiry and watching and learning. Very similar to what the Buddha taught for the monks, not the Eightfold Path. So, passive awareness of yourself, he said, you are the book, you learn. As you learn, illusions drop away, and all this division, the hatred, all these negative emotions arise from illusions. Illusion means you are taking something to be true which is not true. Or you are giving tremendous importance to something which has really no importance. I'll give you an example. We all think it is very important which religion a man belongs to. And they get very angry when a Hindu is converted into a Christian or a Buddhist and so on. Actually, what difference will it make if tomorrow I become a Christian, go to a church, pay some 20 rupees and become a member, and they call me a Christian? Instead of having a stupid Hindu, you will have a stupid Christian in the world. Does it make any difference? Or I'll give you a question to think about. If a man is wise, loving, kind, generous, non-violent, does it matter whether he is Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Buddhist or atheist? And if a man is narrow-minded, selfish, violent, hateful, does it matter whether he is Hindu or Muslim or Christian or atheist? So why we are giving so much importance to the affiliation of a person? What matters is his consciousness. And we said, when you give tremendous importance to something which is not important, it is an illusion. So find out what is the right place of everything in your life. What is the right place of sexuality? If you suppress it, ignore it, you are going wrong. If you pursue it and extol it, again you are going wrong. So what is the right place of it? What is the right place of work? What is the right place of knowledge in life? Thinking, all these things, imagination. What is its right place? And when does it go wrong? Therefore he said it's an art. It's the art of living. Art cannot be learned from a book or from a guru. There is no engineering line which tells me when does need turn into greed, when does wish turn into desire, when does biological fear become psychological fear. Nobody is going to be able to tell you where these boundaries are, but you can learn by playing with it, by wanting to learn about it, and therefore it's like art. A beautiful picture can be made, but you cannot get directions how to make a beautiful picture. That won't make you an artist. But once you have a sense of beauty, you will learn the technique and it will express itself whether in sculpture or in painting and so on. So he said life is like that. You have to learn the art of living, and that's only possible through self-knowledge. Self-knowledge comes from observing oneself with an inquiring, learning mind. You must do this itself not in order to become something, then it becomes an ego process. You must do this for the love of learning. Because through an ego process, you cannot come to the ending of the ego. the means are not separate from the end. Through war you cannot create peace. Through violence you will not come to non-violence. And therefore the beginning itself must be non-egotistic. This inquiry itself must be non-egotistic, must be done with lot of love and curiosity and wonder, because I am part of that mystery and I want to learn about that mystery. There is no reason. You ask, why should you learn? It's like asking, why should I love? If you have a reason why you can why you love, it's not love. If you can tell why you love X, Y, Z, it's attachment. You can give an explanation. Ma'am, I love my wife because she is beautiful, because she cooks good food, because she looks after my children. So if all those reasons I love, then it's not love, it's a business. Suits me, it suits me, therefore I do. But when somebody asks you, why do you love this person? And you say, I myself don't know. There is no reason why I love this person. Then it's perhaps true love. Think about it. So that's his teaching. He says, there is no teaching, nothing that you have to understand from my book. This is the book here. You have to learn about this book, and you can learn. You have all the instruments of learning. But at present you are directing your inquiry to learning about how the sun shines, or what is the capital of France, and how steel is made in Brazil. I mean, who cares? You must learn about yourself. That's more important than learning about the external world. So he created these schools, and he said, in this school, we'll give equal emphasis to a child growing up and acquiring knowledge, because that's needed for functioning in the world. But more importantly, create all this inquiry, discussion, so that he begins to understand himself. What is boredom that I experience? Not running away from boredom. Then the whole entertainment industry comes up, because we are all bored human beings, therefore. But inwardly, when you make a journey, you ask yourself, what is boredom? And when you begin to inquire, you will see that, well, there is my friend, there is that tree, there is the dog round the corner, the child of my neighbor, there is beauty, there is river. And what is boredom? Why am I not interested in any of these things? So you will discover that boredom is insensitivity. So why have I become insensitive? There are causes for insensitivity. Maybe you are eating too much food, maybe you are not sleeping enough, maybe you are too ambitious about your work, therefore all the time thinking about it, and therefore you have become insensitive because you have no time for anything else. Get rid of the causes of insensitivity and you will become sensitive. But right now you are trying to be positively sensitive. You are not learning about boredom. You are trying to run away from it through entertainment. So therefore television, internet, pornography, they make money because we are bored people, and so on. So always the inner learning and the inner causation is more important to understand than the outer cause. That's his teaching. I think I'll end it here.
Thank you so much, Professor G. And then we have this question and answer session. Is there anyone?
Good morning, sir.
Go ahead.
The last congregation you told us, if I love a beautiful girl, this is not love. Then what is the love?
Yes. I didn't say that if you love a beautiful girl or an ugly girl, it is not love. That's your interpretation. What I said is, if there is a reason why you love, then it's not true love. Because supposing I say she is very beautiful, therefore I love her, what happens when she doesn't remain beautiful? That's what generally happens.
Can you accept the beauty is the truth?
It makes no difference whether I accept or don't accept. What makes a difference is that true or not? Is beauty truth? There is that famous poem of Keats, beauty is truth, and truth beauty. That's all there is to know, and all that you need to know. That is the poet Keats. But unless you understand deeply in what sense is the word beauty being used? He's not talking of beauty because Marilyn Monroe looks beautiful. No. Find out what is the deeper meaning of truth and what is the deeper meaning of beauty. Then you will understand that poem. Otherwise, you give superficial meaning to the words and you come to your own conclusion. That will be another illusion. That's why it is important not to accept what somebody says, but to turn it into a question. What does he mean? And is that true? Don't answer it from your previous knowledge. Explore in your own life, and from your observation, discover the answer whether what is true or not. That's why Krishnamurti repeatedly said, sir, don't accept a thing which I say. Don't accept it. Question it. Tear it down. Discuss it. Find out if what I am telling you is true. If it's not true, throw it away. It has no value just because Krishnamurti said it. It has value if it is true, because if it's true, that's a fact. A fact has value. Not opinion and not illusion.
Thank you for your vast and profound speech. And my question is that you just said that Krishnamurti avoid the Theosophical Society because they are propaganda and they use something like religious. But nowadays Krishnamurti himself have a Krishnamurti Foundation, and it's something like the making the something like the religious as before the Theosophical Society use, and so is also have to be avoided, or what do you think about this?
Yes. The foundation has no authority over the teachings. They are not a group of people who have a deeper understanding of the teaching than people. The truth is the truth. It's the same for all human beings, and therefore it's universal. The deeper truth, not the relative truth, the absolute truth. And so the trustees of the foundation are not people who have a better understanding of Krishnamurti's teaching or of the truth. They are people who are making his work available, publishing the books, running the schools, trying to create that kind of education, also learning in that process about themselves. So they are just like anybody else. So the foundation is an organization, but it's like a functional organization, like a hospital or a post office. It is not doing propaganda about Krishnamurti's teachings. In fact, when somebody said to him, sir, I am very enthused by your teaching. Tell me how to spread it. What is the best way to spread it? He said, sir, don't try to spread the teaching. You will only spread the word, and the word is not the teaching.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
And my second question is, in your view, what's the real meaningful life?
Real meaningful?
Life.
Life?
Yes, sir.
If you can get out of the prison of yourself, the prison, because if I can only view the world as a Hindu or as a theosophist, with all these particular beliefs and so on, which are just accidents of birth, that I was born in that kind of family and so on, it has no great importance. And I am not interested only in a particular view. I am interested in discovering what is the truth. So I posit the truth as the unknown, and I am eager to learn about that. So I have to get out of this very narrow circle which I form of my family, my religion, my country, my nationality, my body, my opinions. So this my, that's the ego. So until you come out of this, you don't really know what life is. And so what we call life, according to Krishnamurti, is not life at all. It is just this whole, all the time fighting and bitterness. And I mean, his sentence, I'll tell you, when he was asked, he said, life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. Okay? Bada rahasya hai. It's a great mystery. And you want to discover that mystery. That is life. It's an opportunity for you to discover about that mystery. But you have turned it into something very small, into making an achievement, becoming an engineer or getting money or success. You have reduced it to that. He says that's not what it is. Because you are looking at it that way, it becomes a series of problems to be solved. And the man who can solve them quickly and so on, you call intelligent. That intelligence is not true intelligence. And this view of looking at life itself is ignorance. Life is not a problem to be solved, not a series of problems to be solved. So can you live without a single problem? Don't regard life as a problem. Find out. That's true life. Otherwise, you are living a series of problems because everybody is born and everybody has joys and sorrows and worries and everything. You go through and then you end up at Manikarnika Ghat. You want to go very fast, but that's where you will end. Whether you go in a Mercedes or you go in a bicycle.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes,
and
sir.
Thank you very much for your speech. And I have maybe 3 questions, so I will ask one by one.
One by one, thank you.
And my first question is that in your speech that you say, according to the teaching of Krishnamurti, that when you face, let's say, anger, then you neither eliminate it nor you suppress it. You just have to learn it. But according to my own understanding, that that is not the end. Or what I mean is that if I'm angry, then yeah, I will learn about it. But if I stop there, then it will come again. So according to the Buddhist concept, when you learn about the anger, then you learn how to eliminate it. Then you learn to know how you uproot it from the mold, from the root. So by that means, then you can free off yourself from anger. So that is the ultimate, destination of learning about anger. But according to the doctrine or teaching of the J. Krishnamurti, according to on my understanding, that the ultimate destination is to know about the anger. Beyond that, is there any other part or step, or just you have to learn about it and stop here?
No, I could not make myself very clear. If I get angry, there is an external cause. You misbehave towards me, so I get angry. That's the external cause. You can deal with the external cause, try to avoid people who misbehave, try to threaten them so that they will not misbehave again, and that's what normally people do. But if I am inwardly directed about learning about myself, I am not so much interested in the external cause, I am interested in the inner cause. So I have to ask myself, where did this anger come from? Right? So I stay with this question and I watch myself, and the next time I get angry, I watch. You will find that ultimately there is something which you believe or which you have assumed to be true, which is not true. And so it arises out of an illusion in our mind. And so long as that illusion doesn't end, the anger will arise. You can suppress it, you can control your hand, but you can't control your feeling. The feeling of anger will be there. You may not turn it into violence, another man may turn it into violence. Both are violent. One is expressing it in physical form, the other one is only hating and keeping shut. That is suppression. That still does not free your consciousness of the process by which the anger arises, and therefore the anger will arise again. So, I must get rid of the illusion which creates the anger. I can do that by watching and learning about what is the source of that illusion. And when you perceive the truth, the illusion ends. You can't end something which is a fact of nature. So if you put a pin into the Buddha's body, he will feel pain like you and I feel. But self-pity, oh, why did this happen to me, I am so unfortunate and so on, is a psychological process created by my thinking. The Buddha can avoid that. He may not have that cycle. He just notices that, okay, I ran into a pin and therefore there is pain. Right? Doesn't create psychological suffering, does not convert that into sorrow or into self-pity. So we have to distinguish between the biological or organic, which you cannot change, and the psychological, which is my own creation. It is the creation of my own thoughts. So if I don't think that way, it goes away. But you need a lot of learning before that will change. It is not enough to know, nor is it enough to just name it that yes, I am watching, this is anger. That's too superficial. Watching means you go watch till you discover the illusion from which that is arising. I'll give you an example. Supposing I was a professor of physics. Now what happens? You start having an image about yourself, that I am a very good professor, I work so hard for my students, I take a lot of pains and so on and so on. You start appreciating your own work and feeling a good opinion about yourself. And then one of your students goes out and says, he's a lousy professor, I can't follow what he says. What is the good of being a big professor and so on? I don't understand anything. And this is communicated to me. So I get angry. What? I take so much trouble for these children and they are so ungrateful. He goes and talks against me in society. I'll put him in his place. And next day he is angry and he is shouting at him and he is threatening him, if you do that again I will fail you in the examination. All this is commonplace. What happens? The egoistic reaction in that individual. Supposing I approach it differently. I take that as an input of information that one of the students in my class is not following my lectures. But as a teacher, I am there to communicate with my students. So I want to find out, are there more students like that? Is it because he is not studying and therefore he is not able to follow my lectures? Or is it because I am assuming a certain amount of knowledge on their part which they don't have? And therefore I am just talking and I am thinking I am teaching very well, but I am not reaching at all. Communication is not happening. Now I have an inquiring mind, so next day I go in the lecture hall and I ask them, what do you think? Yes, last time we studied this, have you understood that? You ask a few questions and you discover that most of them have not followed what you have said. Now I have learned something about myself and about the situation. Where is the question of getting angry? So the anger comes from that opinion one has about oneself, that I am a very good professor and I have a reputation. What is reputation? So I have to find out what is reputation. Just because other people think highly of me, it may be false. You may think I am a great man, I may not be a great man. So is truth more important or your opinion, favorable opinion is important? If the favorable opinion is important, I'll keep on pretending to be a great man without being a great man. So you become a hypocrite. So all that is behind it. So if I free myself of all that, it's a big load off the mind. I'm not concerned about the opinion. I'm concerned about the fact. And the fact is that some of my students are not following what I am teaching. And I am concerned about it. I want to teach in such a way that I can communicate to them. So you see, the way you approach it determines whether you will feel anger or you will learn from that. That's what I'm trying to say.
And thank you very much for your marvelous answer. And I just have a
Second question.
second question. As along with that, I have a request as well. Request that I know there are many other students who want to ask, so maybe you could shoulder the answer.
Yes.
And my question is that actually, from what you say, what I got to understand from your speaking is that though there's a chance to decrease the anger, but there's no chance to completely eliminate the anger from within yourself.
No. If it arises in me, it is informing me, Krishna, there is still illusion in your mind somewhere. Find out what that illusion is and end it. But I start saying one should not be angry, it is unfortunate that I became angry, I must go and apologize and etc., paschatap and all this business. So you make a big song and dance about it. You don't use that for learning about yourself. If anger comes, or violence comes, or hatred comes, it's an opportunity to learn about that. Learning about that means what is the source from which it is arising. You have to go to the source. Otherwise, it is like in nature there is cause and effect. If you don't change the cause, the effect follows. Krishnamurti is saying in your psyche also there is cause and effect. If you don't eliminate the cause, the effect comes. You then keep on managing the effect and so on. That is management of the ego. Right? That is Dale Carnegie. How to win friends and influence people, and that means how to massage the ego and manage your things in life. That is not dissolution of the ego or freedom from the ego. The religious quest is about freeing oneself inwardly, transformation of your consciousness so that all the disorder in consciousness as negative emotions ends.
And my last question, sir. In your speech that you say you can become something or someone, because that could be egoistic.
No. The question is not whether you become something, whether you were all along doing that thing in order to become that, or you were doing that because that's what you love to do and you happen to have become that. The two things are different. Are you doing your job to get the salary, or are you doing that job because you love to teach those children and they give you a salary?
And you become something.
Approach is different. You know, in one case it's egotistic, in the other case it is not egotistic.
So what do you mean is that you become something according to your own understanding is not egoistic? And you become something according to the following all the doctrines or something like teachings, then you become egoistic.
Yeah, I think this is such a central question that I'm going to overrule your objection and give a little longer answer. I'll give you a simple example. You know, they play games, Olympics, or you watch cricket, tennis, all this. If you play a game for the love of playing, for the joy of playing the game, and don't give importance to whether you win or lose, there is no desire to cheat. Your friend who is playing on the opposite side doesn't look like an enemy or a rival. But if you give tremendous importance to winning the game, then you want to cheat. You feel happy if he falls and is not able to play, and so on. But otherwise, all those wrong emotions don't come into the picture. You play, maybe you lose the game, then you go and shake his hand and say, you played very well, I would like to play more from you because I would like to learn from you. Right? There is no ill feeling, no enmity, nothing. You have enjoyed the game. Right? So if a game can be played non-egotistically, and then all this rivalry and downsides don't come in it. And the same game, when it is played egotistically because you want the prize, you want to be the victor, and so on, turns egotistic and all the wrongdoing comes into the game. My question to you is, isn't whole of life like a game? Find out. if it can be played egotistically, the same game can be played non-egotistically. Then you won't have any of that disorder coming into it.
Thank you so much once again, and now it's time for lunch, and now it's the end of our